The funny part is I didn't find out someone stole my land from a lawyer, or a judge, or some dramatic knock on the door. I found out because my neighbor called me while I was holding a warm coffee and feeling way too proud of myself for being productive before 9 a.m. And when he said, "Marcus, somebody's building on your lot," I actually laughed like, "Buddy, what lot?" Then I realized he wasn't joking and my coffee suddenly tasted like panic. I bought that 8-acre patch on the corner of Riverside Drive and Commerce Boulevard back in 2009 for 80 grand, the kind of dusty scrub land people point at and go, "Why?" No houses nearby, soil that looked like it hated life, not a tree in sight, and the nearest grocery store was basically a road trip, but I'd been watching the town creep east for years, subdivision by subdivision, strip mall by strip mall. And I had this quiet little conviction that one day the county would rezone that whole corridor commercial, and when it happened, that stupid dirt would turn into gold. So I held it, year after year. Paid the taxes, every single year, like clockwork, and I didn't do a whole lot else with it. That's the thing about land, it's the most boring asset in the world until it suddenly isn't. And in 2023, boom, rezoning hits, and overnight that $80,000 bet was now sitting at around $2.4 million. Developers called, they emailed, they slid offers across tables like they were doing me a favor, and I kept saying no, not because I'm a genius, because I'm stubborn, and I'm patient, and I've learned that the person who's willing to wait usually wins. Apparently Karen Westfield didn't get that memo. When Joe Martinez called me, I tossed the coffee in the sink and drove over there with my heart doing that annoying little flutter it does when your brain is screaming and your face is trying to stay calm. I roll up to the corner and Joe's standing by his pickup like a guy watching his house burn. "Look," he says. And there it is, bulldozers, excavators, dump trucks, trailers, stacks of lumber, 20 workers in hard hats moving like ants on caffeine, 15 concrete foundations poured in neat rows, like somebody used a ruler and a grudge. It wasn't maybe construction. It was real. It was expensive. It was already happening. Right near the entrance is this big glossy sign, Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza coming fall 2026, 15 retail and office units, a Westfield Development Group project. On my land. I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at it, listening to the clank of metal, the hiss of hydraulic lines, the beep 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 of a backing loader, and I had this moment where my body wanted to do the normal human thing. Storm in there, start yelling, call the cops, wave paperwork around like a flag. Then another part of me, this older, quieter part, went, wait. Because here's what most people don't understand about construction. Half-finished buildings are basically expensive trash. They're nightmares. They're lawsuits and weather damage, and who's responsible for the rebar arguments. But completed buildings with tenants, those are a machine that prints money. So I did something that made Joe look at me like I'd lost my mind. I didn't stop them. Not yet. I walked closer, stayed on public property, and asked the foreman real casual, "Hey, what's going on here?" He barely looked up from his clipboard. "Commercial Plaza, 15 units, should be done by September." I nodded like I was impressed, which honestly I was. Then I asked, "Who owns the land?" He flips a page and goes, "Riverside Commons HOA Community Development Project." HOA. That's when I knew this wasn't a simple mistake, it was a story. I went home, pulled my old folder, Riverside Property 2009, held my deed in my hands like it was a holy document, then opened the county database. Permits were right there. Applicant, Karen Westfield. Owner, Riverside Commons HOA. Total project cost, $4.2 million. $4.2 million. I dug deeper, and there it was, an adverse possession claim filed in October 2022. Karen Westfield, on behalf of Riverside Commons HOA, claiming the land had been abandoned, claiming the previous owner of record was Harold Martinez, deceased, no heirs located, no maintenance for over 10 years. Which was adorable, in a criminal sort of way, because Harold Martinez sold me that land in 2009, and I'd been paying taxes ever since. I wasn't dead. I wasn't missing. I was literally on the tax rolls in black and white. All she had to do was a 5-minute search. But she didn't, or she did, and she decided to gamble anyway. I called my old law partner, Daniel Torres. Dan's the kind of attorney who sounds calm even when he's holding a grenade. I tell him what's happening and there's this long silence. Then he goes, "Marcus, file an injunction." "Stop it." Immediately. And I said, "No." He actually laughed like he thought I was kidding. "No. Dan," I said, "half-finished buildings are worthless. Completed, Leased buildings are worth 6, maybe 7 million. Every dollar she spends from this point on increases the value of my property. Another long silence. Then very slowly he goes, "That is either brilliant or completely insane." "Good," I said, "because I don't have time to be normal today." So I watched. Week after week. I'd park across the street and walk the sidewalk like I'm out for exercise, snapping photos, framing, roofs, windows, drywall, HVAC, paint, landscaping, parking lot striping. It was like watching a time-lapse of someone else building me a future. And then in late June, a new sign goes up, "Leasing now." That's when I decided I wanted to meet Karen. I called the number, said I was looking for office space. A cheerful voice transfers me, and Karen comes on sounding like confidence, wearing perfume. We set a tour for Thursday at 2 p.m. Thursday comes, and I show up like I'm just another guy with a business card and a dream. Karen meets me at the entrance, late 40s, blonde hair, expensive suit, handshake firm enough to bend steel. She walks me through the site, talking fast, talking proud, perfect location, high visibility. We've already leased 12 units, community benefit, innovative model. Then I ask, real gently, "So who owns all this?" She smiles. "Riverside Commons HOA. I'm the HOA president. My company is managing development." "And the land?" I ask. She barely blinks. "It was abandoned property. Previous owner died years ago. No heirs. We went through the proper channels." She said it like she was reading a bedtime story to herself. I nodded and let her keep talking, because sometimes the truth shows up when you just give someone enough rope and a stage. A few weeks later, she holds a preview event for HOA members. Tents, refreshments, little presentation, applause like she'd cured a disease. She's clicking through slides. 15 units, 42,000 square feet, projected annual rental income, 890,000, and then she drops the big promise, smiling like a game show host. "This revenue will reduce HOA fees by 40%. People clap. People cheer. People are already spending the money in their heads. Then someone asks, "How did the HOA fund a $4 million build?" Karen, without even flinching, says, "We secured a commercial development loan." A loan. On my property. And here's where I felt something shift inside me, because it wasn't just about a woman playing fast and loose with paperwork. She was dragging an entire neighborhood into it, feeding them a fantasy, using their trust like collateral. And for a second, just a second, I thought, maybe I should have stopped this earlier. Then I remembered she didn't stop when she lied. She didn't stop when she took the gamble. She didn't stop when she signed a bank note on land she didn't own. So why should I be the one to stop? By early September, the plaza looked gorgeous, glass facades, clean signage, landscaping so neat it looked photoshopped. The mayor even showed up to cut a ribbon at the grand opening. Karen gave speeches about community-driven development. Cameras flashed. She and her husband Donald stood there soaking it up like sunlight. And I sat across the street in my car, holding my deed in a manila envelope, watching her celebrate a house built on sand. 2 days later, Dan filed the lawsuit: trespass, quiet title, fraud, unjust enrichment, and an emergency motion for a restraining order. Process servers delivered it like bad karma, in an envelope. Karen called me first. Her voice was tight, like she was trying not to crack. "Mr. Webb, I just received a lawsuit claiming you own the property where Riverside Commons Plaza is located." "That's correct." "That's impossible. We went through adverse possession. The county granted title." "The county granted provisional title," I said, "based on a claim that was false. I bought that land in 2009. I've paid taxes every year." She tried to argue, tenants, leases, grand opening, community, like any of that changes whose name is on a deed. And I told her very calmly, "The hearing is tomorrow. Bring your attorney." Donald called next, loud and angry, like volume could rewrite reality. "You're stealing our buildings." I almost laughed. "Donald, you built on my land. That makes them my buildings." Courtroom the next day, Judge Brennan, no nonsense, former real estate attorney, the kind of guy who can smell a shortcut from across the room. Karen's attorney tries the good faith angle, and the judge asks one simple question that felt like a hammer dropping. "Did you check who was paying property taxes before you filed?" Karen hesitates. "No, Your Honor." The judge looks down at my 15 years of tax records, then back up at her like she'd just confessed to driving blindfolded. "A tax roll search takes 5 minutes," he says. "This was negligence." Then he grants the restraining order, effective immediately. No collecting rent. No signing leases. Turn over keys and access within 48 hours. And the look on Karen's face, it wasn't just fear. It was the moment a person realizes the floor they're standing on was never theirs. They stalled, of course. People like that always stall. Dan filed contempt. I threatened daily fines. The next morning they showed up at Dan's office with boxes of documents, keys, passwords. Karen looked exhausted. Donald looked like he wanted to punch a wall. Karen asked quietly, "What happens to the loan?" "And this is where reality gets cold. That's between you and the bank," I told her. "You pledged collateral you didn't own." After that, I met every tenant, coffee shop owner, dental office, law firm, yoga studio, people just trying to run their businesses. They were freaked out, and I don't blame them. I told them the truth. Your leases stand. You're safe. You did nothing wrong. You'll just be paying rent to me now. One of them, James Donnelly, managing partner at the law firm, looks at me and goes, "Why did you let them finish building?" I shrugged. Because I had a choice. Panic and get a half-finished mess, or wait and end up with a completed plaza. I waited. He stared at me like I was both terrifying and impressive, which honestly felt fair. Now here's the twist. Because the story didn't end with Karen versus me, it ended with Karen versus everybody. Joe calls me after an HOA meeting and says, "You won't believe what happened. Karen tried to rally the neighborhood against you." "Let me guess," I said. "I'm the outsider stealing their dream." "Yeah, but then this guy Tom Brennan, accountant, quiet dude, stands up and starts asking questions," Joe says, voice excited like he's recounting a bar fight. "He looked up Westfield Development. It's an LLC owned by Karen and Donald. Private. Not the HOA. People lost it. They voted her out, unanimously. New president, Sarah Mitchell, retired CPA, she hired investigators. The HOA sued Karen. Fraud. Breach of duty. Misrepresentation. Turns out when you use a community like a costume, they eventually notice the zipper. And then the bank came in like the final boss. Mountain West Bank realized their collateral was garbage, their borrower was in default, and the whole thing smelled like loan fraud. They wanted out. They wanted to recover. They approached us about buying the plaza, and I negotiated like I was ordering at a drive-thru, calm and sure, because at that point the leverage wasn't on my side, it was basically living in my house. We closed at $6.5 million. Let that sink in. I paid $80,000 for the land, plus taxes over 15 years, plus legal fees, and I walked away with a profit north of $6 million because someone else poured the concrete. Karen and Donald? Bankruptcy. Business dead. Reputation buried. They left the state. The HOA? They limped forward, embarrassed and angry, tightening rules, recording meetings, finally learning what oversight means when your money's on the line. And me, I drove past the plaza about a year later, parking across the street like I used to, just watching it hum. Cars coming and going, the coffee shop full, tenants working, lights on, the whole place alive. It looked like success. It looked like exactly what Karen wanted to build. She just built it on the wrong land. Here's the thing I learned, real, deep, uncomfortable lesson. Law and morality don't always shake hands, they just share a room. People love to scream fair when they're winning and love to scream unfair when the rules finally touch them. Karen called it community development while she cut herself a deal behind the curtain. The HOA called it ours because they liked the promised discount. The bank called it secured because they trusted paperwork more than reality. Everybody wanted the reward, nobody wanted to do the boring part, the due diligence, the accountability, the asking one extra question before signing the check. And karma is patient. Sometimes it waits 15 years with you, then shows up wearing a hard hat. So yeah, was it satisfying watching Karen lose everything after she tried to take what wasn't hers? Absolutely. I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel that quiet little hum in my chest when the judge confirmed title and her story collapsed like bad framing. Justice isn't always dramatic, sometimes it's just paperwork catching up to arrogance. But here's the question that still messes with people: where's the line? If you discover someone is building on your land, do you stop it immediately because it feels right? Or do you let it play out because the law is on your side and the end result is better for you, better for the tenants, better for your future? Tell me what you think. Was I protecting my rights, or was I letting greed ride shotgun? Drop your take in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA power trip, a shady land dispute, a neighbor who borrowed more than they should have, share your story too, because I swear the more I live, the more I realize the real world isn't divided into good people and bad people, it's divided into people who check the records and people who don't.